And welcome back to my channel. Unless you're new here, and just welcome. My name is Rusty, and this is my channel where I talk about my favorite movies, mostly horror, and my favorite music, mostly metal. And tonight we are going to be talking about The Little Girl Who Lives Down the Lane. Now this is the Kino Lorber remaster of The Little Girl Who Lives Down the Lane. It's got a nice double-sided slip cover art. Oh, Scott. So, The Little Girl Who Lives Down the Lane was released in 1976. It was directed by Nicolas Gessner, written by Laird Koenig, and it stars Jodie Foster, Martin Sheen, Scott Jacobi, and Alexis Smith. Now, this movie opens with 13-year-old Reese, who is walking along the beach. She is going home. She gets to the house and she has a nice little birthday cake. She's alone and she, is there with it. When there's a knock at the door, and it's a guy named Frank, and this is played by Martin Sheen, who introduces himself, says that he has stopped by his kids on Halloween. Now, Ren and her father have been living in England, so they have moved over to, where does this take place? Oh my goodness. I know it was filmed in Melbourne. I mean, not Melbourne. Canada. So, yeah, I'm not sure where this is set. New England-y. But, so, she is there. From there, so she doesn't know, and he's like talking to her about Halloween, that his kids will be coming along. She acts like she doesn't know what he's talking about. He asks if they celebrate Halloween over there, and she said no. So he explains it to her, and trick-or-treating, and they celebrate Halloween, they just trick-or-treating. So he explains to her what trick-or-treating is, and she's like, well, what is a treat? And then he said, just candy or something like that. And so she says, well, I'll give them a piece of cake. So she cuts off 2 pieces of cake and is going to give it to him for the kids. But we see very, very clearly, he asks where her dad is. She said he's in the study, that he can't be disturbed. And then he tells her that he is the son of Cora, the real estate lady, who had leased them the house. This has been leased for 3 years, and they've only just arrived recently. So Frank is obviously a pedophile. You can see it all over him, the way he talks to her, his infatuation. He even pops her on the butt, which she is not very happy about, and he nearly stumbles all over the place. Oh, it's your birthday. You get a birthday spanking. From a stranger? You just grabbed my ass. Okay. Whatever. So, the next day we see her going to the bank, again by herself. And she is using her key to sign to enter a safe deposit box at the bank, where we see her cashing some traveler's checks. And, the bank teller is like, she's only 13. And he's like, it's okay. It's her and her dad have a joint account. She can do whatever she wants, So, she's cashing traveler's checks. And then she gets back to the house, and Cora arrives, and you can tell she's a bitch from hell. you know, and she comes in and she's just like, I would have immediately been like, excuse me, we need to do a reset. Step out. Step out. Knock on the door. I will invite you in and we can discuss where. But she just walks into the house. She starts rearranging furniture and shit like that. And I would be like, yeah. So I was like really with Ren, you know, and her reaction to this woman's behavior. And she's definitely a smartass about it, you know. So she's there to pick up crab apples, and she comes in, makes herself at home. She's very, very nosy, and she wants some jars from the cellar. And she asked her about her son's visit, because she knows her son had told her that he had come over. So she asked about the son's visit. She obviously knows he's a pedo. So she's very, very interested. Her facial expressions. She's very, very interested at Ren's answers. You know, did he stay long? What did he say? Was your dad here? You know, and stuff like that. So she obviously knows. They start arguing about the cellar, you know, because she wants to get right, you know, to get in it right there. And Ren starts telling her to get the fuck out, basically. You know, that this is her house, to get out. And the way that she sort of ends the conversation was she says some smart ass stuff about her son, because she's not stupid. She knows what he was after and what he is. So she kind of uses that against Cora to get Cora to get flustered and leave. So she does. So Frank sees her in town again and offers a ride, but she manages to skirt him mainly because Detective Ron shows up, pulls up beside her, and all of a sudden Frank acts very, oh sure, just asking, and goes back inside. And you know, Detective Ron is like, let me give you a ride home. So she kind of gets to know him and invites him into the house. And, you know, he kind of like says something about Frank, you know, has he bothered you? You know, stuff like that. So it's all very tiptoey, you can tell from everybody. And Ren is such a genius. She is such a smart kid that she knows all of this and she knows how to play it as well. So he wants to meet her dad, but she skirts the subject again. You know, she'll tell people that he's spending, I think she said he was spending the night in New York with his publisher. So she used that often. She also used the, he's in the study and I'm not allowed to disturb him when he's in the study. That's her two main excuses that she uses for people. And you do start wondering, like, where the fuck is her dad and what's up? So Cora comes back again and they clash. Cora starts just getting really out of control, threatening, and, you know, where I'm going to break the lease and all kind of stuff, and demands to see the father. She then threatens Cora back by using her son, because after listening to her own behavior and after listening to Detective Ron, she knows she's got the ace card. So she starts, you know, kind of like mouthing off about the son. Like, you fucking say anything and I will tell about your son's visit. What kind? What? Why? What did my son do? What are you talking about? You know, so she's doing that. And Cora, like, slaps the fuck out of her after she, you know, kind of says that stuff about her son. Then she walks over there and she grabs the jars and she picks them up and starts to storm out the house, but notices there's no seals. Now, if you've ever had a grandmother who's, like, made pickles and stuff, you know that mason jars are of no use if they don't have the rubber seals, right? So there wasn't any, and she's like, these are no good without seals. I'm going to get the seals out of the cellar. Too bad for Ren that she didn't know about, jars, pickling jars. But, so she ends up saying, I'm going to go get them. And Ren's like screaming at her to get the fuck out of her house. She refuses. She opens up the thing and goes down into the cellar. Now, Ren is like standing there like really strange, and you're like, what's up? And you hear Cora scream very loudly, and she comes running back up the stairs of the cellar so fast that she hits the brace board, which then causes the thing to fall on her head, and Ren just sits there like, and she goes up there and opens it up, and that woman is deader than yesterday's newspaper. You know what I mean? I mean, she's dead. She's like bloody, eyes wide open. So what the fuck do you do now? So she starts actually trying to clean up. She meets Mario outside as she's trying to crank the lady's car at Cora's car. Now, Mario is played by Scott Jacobi, and I, of course, didn't see this movie when it came out, but when I did see this movie, I was about the same age as Scott Jacobi is in this movie. So even though he was a lot older by the time I saw it, his character is the same age as I was when I saw it, and let me tell you, the crush was sledgehammer kind of crush. I was just all about Scott Jacobi because I had seen Bad Ronald, so I already had this super sledgehammer crush on Scott Jacobi. So seeing this movie, which also stars him, was just like Bad Ronald, and Little Girl Who Lives Down the Lane is just like Scott Jacobi heaven, for my little 14-year-old self when I saw this movie. And Bad Ronald. So, she meets Mario and they kind of talk, and he agrees to come back and help with whatever she's up to. And they end up, like, he goes and dumps the car in town. He didn't do it exactly like she said, so she kind of bitches at him. She cooks, like, dinner and everything. And they sit and talk about it. While they're having dinner, Detective Ron shows back up and wants to see her dad and tells them about Cora's car being found at her real estate office. And, he's like, we can't find her. Her car's at her office. Did she come by here? And, Ren is so quick on her feet. She's not perfect, but she's quick on her feet. And she's like, no, there's the jars she was going to come and pick up, and they're still sitting there. She never came. So then he was like, well, I really need to see your dad. Well, he's asleep. And then Mario lies on the fly about having met the dad. Yeah, he ate dinner. He ate a while ago, but he wasn't hungry. So he left and went to bed, and we finished, So he actually lies that he tells them about Cora being missing and leaves after Mario lies for it. Frank shows up that same night, just a little bit later, sees Mario, makes a bunch of threats. They make them watch him kill her hamster, which, prior to him doing that, you kind of considered Frank more of a stupid annoyance. I mean, granted, you could tell that he had interests, but, we're not the thought police. So just because you can tell a person might, that dad at the high school football game that watches the 14-year-old cheerleaders a little too closely for a panty shot, that doesn't mean you can arrest them just because they think something. That's the way you have to look at it, because it's just the truth. Otherwise, you end up in George Orwell's 1984. So you have to resist your urge to be the thought police about stuff like that. And so up until this point, you kind of gave him that benefit of the doubt. You were like, okay, you're kind of pervy, you're a little touchy-feely, but you haven't really done anything other than be a pervy, touchy-feely pedo, obviously. You obviously have the thoughts, but you haven't done nothing. But when he brutally killed that hamster in front of them, ended up, demanding to see her father, tells Mario to leave and wants to know where his mom is too. Wants to know where his mom, Cora, is. Mario gets tired of being called all kind of slurs because he's Italian, so he's, I guess, yeah. And he's called a wop and dago and all that kind of stuff. So he gets tired of that, and he turns around and pulls out a rapier. The cane that he has is actually a rapier. And he nearly... Frank leaves at that point. So, and Mario was crying when he did it. So that's how insulted and furious he was. So it's after this that we knew that Frank, whom up to this point had been a creeper, annoying, was actually dangerous. Was actually really physically dangerous and a threat. So it's at this point that Ren trusts him enough and spills it all. She tells him about the body, and he goes down there and looks, and tells him about her mother, whom we learn at this moment is also dead in the cellar. And that's what Cora screamed about when she had went down there, was she had seen Ren's mother's dead body down there. And at this point, you were wondering, like, maybe it was the dad or something, because you've never seen them yet. So we also then get the backstory. She tells him about her father and how this whole thing came to be. Her father found out that he was dying of cancer. He did not want the mother, whom they both despised, to get a hold of his money, to get a hold of his daughter. She didn't want that either. So he specifically chose this place in New England, Montreal. It was filmed in Montreal. I don't know if it was set in Montreal. It might have been set in New England and filmed in Montreal. I don't know. I would have to look it up. But so he specifically chose this place for his plan that he had created with his daughter. And that was that I guess you can be emancipated at 16. So I know for a fact you can in England, and since that's where they were from, she could go back to England. But so the plan was that they would find a quiet place where he could kill himself, and that by putting tens of thousands upon thousands of dollars in cashier's check in the bank, teaching her how to pay the bills, stay quiet, stay calm, stay out of trouble, don't interfere with nothing, keep a very, very low profile, which isn't working out well for her, I might add. But that's not her fault. These people want to come and fuck with you, right? So we have this plan set up. The house is leased for 3 years. It's all paid up, paid in full. You're going to pay the light bill, you're going to pay the phone bill, you're going to pay the water bill, whatever. It could work, especially back then in 1976. I don't know, it might could work even better now. Because you can pay everything online, so it might work a lot better now, actually. But even back then, provided she kept a low profile and kept out of trouble, you know, shouldn't be getting a boyfriend, though, and killing people. You got to do what you got to do to survive. So, he had set it up for her to live alone so that she would not be taken by the mother and that she would not be taken by the state in any event, in either event. So, he then, after everything was set up, lived for as long as he could with her until it was getting close. Then he had the tides and all set up correctly so that he would go out to sea, out into the Atlantic. And then he went out to the beach and committed suicide, leaving her to carry out the plan. Now, this didn't work out well because the first bump came along. And that was when Ren's mother managed to track them down and showed up. And she was just as she remembered her when she hated her before she abandoned them. And was like, you know, I'm so glad to find you. We're going to have a lot of fun. You know, I'm going to be mommy and we're going to have all daddy's money because he's a poet. And stuff like that. So she just went into the kitchen, filled her tea full of cyanide, which her dad had got her for emergencies like this, and killed her mother. Put her in the basement. Then this shit happened with Cora. Now she got 2 bodies in the basement. So before you found out about the mom, you thought that, well, it was just an accident. She ain't done nothing bad. Till you find out she had murdered her mother before this even happened, and now you're like back to, well, you're a naughty little girl, aren't you? But I do agree with her, actually, and her father. So, once Mario knows all this, because she's telling him all of this story while they eat almond cookies and drink tea. He notices she's not drinking hers, and after all, she has bumped off everybody who knows her secret. So he's so cute because he starts having a panic attack. You know, like, it's getting hot in here, I'm sweating. What exactly are the signs of cyanide poisoning? Because he's already drank the tea. So actually, you're kind of laughing at him because you know he's got to be like really uncomfortable right now. And then she finally starts drinking her tea from the same thing, so you know it's not poison. And he sees that, and she finally notices that he's having a legit panic attack on the couch. He's handling it well, but he's having a panic attack. And she finally looks at him, you know, like behind her cup, like, what's the matter with you? And I thought to myself, girl, why would you have to ask what's the matter with him? You are just explaining to him how you murdered your mother with cyanide in the tea. And when she noticed the taste, because you know cyanide tastes like almonds, when she noticed the taste of the tea, you told her it was because of the almond cookies. You just told him all of this while he's drinking tea and eating almond cookies. The boy deserved every second of that panic attack, okay? And she was a little to not notice, you know, like to ask that question. I thought it was kind of funny. So, let me get to the panic attack. Yeah. Thought for a second that she had just killed him too. After a week goes by, he agrees to help. He comes and helps her bury the bodies. They dig a big hole. They bury the bodies really close to the house, like right around the corner of the house. They bury the bodies. Detective Ron stops again. This time he's a little bit more forceful, and he demands to see her father. You know, and he's just like, I'm sorry, Ren, but, you know, I don't believe you. I don't know what's going on, but I don't believe you. And she's like, well, sure it is. Hold on. So she actually goes and gets her dad. And you're like, what? And then Mario. I mean, you know he's a magician. He's a little actor anyway. But he's got this pretty realistic mask on. And he comes out, you know, with this little hat and in his robe and carrying a walking stick. And he fools his own uncle. Now, granted, they don't get super close. I think they get about, well, he signs a book for him. They get 5 to 6 feet apart. But it's made up really well. So, he fools him into thinking that that's Ren's father. He even signs the book that she had promised that he would sign. And Ron's all happy now. Detective Ron's all happy now. He has met her dad. So I think it's at this point that Ren realizes, I didn't expect shit like this to happen, and it did. So me and my dad had not planned for everything like we thought we had. But it could still work, but I've got to have help. And if it's just one person, it can be Mario. You know, so I think she sees a savior in Mario because the plan is going to work. With Mario's help, it will work. Because, hey, it fooled his own uncle. And it's not like that's going to happen many times. Because now that Detective Ron has seen her dad, he would probably never have to see him again. All of his New York trips and stuff would work perfectly fine because Ron's mind has been settled on the subject. So even if she had to do that very often, or she would never have to do that very often, but even if she had to do that once or twice, once a person saw that, they would never think about it again. So you're not going to have to do it too often. So, Mori, when Ron stops by, because Mario, you know, when he helped her bury the bodies, he stayed out in that rain. Ron ends up stopping by a final time. And this was to, you know, talk to her for a minute. And they're outside, and he notices like footprints around the snow. For a second, she's scared because it's right where the bodies are. But he's like, no, that looks like recent, like last night kind of footprints. Now, we know that was Frank, right? She doesn't get it, though. So it's at that point, you know, he's like, I can't believe you haven't asked about Mario. And she's like, why? What's wrong with Mario? Well, he's got double pneumonia, and is in the hospital. And they're not sure if he's going to make it. So she goes to the hospital and visits him and tells him that her and her dad had not planned everything and she can't make it without him for this plan to work. For this plan to work, she needs him and she loves him and blah, blah, blah. So she goes back home after visiting him. And she goes to bed and she hears a noise and she gets up and it sounded like the cellar, so it was very spooky. She gets down there and all of a sudden the cellar thing opens and it's like a top hat and a cape. And for a split second she thinks it's Mario, which was definitely you've just been woken up because she just saw him in the hospital. You know, it's not like he could get home after double pneumonia. He was unconscious, for God's sakes. So, it's only a split second that she thinks it's Mario because of the cape and the hat. And then we see that it's Frank. So Frank gets up, comes through the cellar, and tells her that all of these shenanigans are over. That they are going to be friends now. That he knows something's up and that he will be, you know, and she's like, I'll call the police. And he's like, go ahead. and he pulls out a hairpin from his mother, and he's like, it even smells like her perfume. And look at this, a big red fingernail down there. So he pretty much tells her, I know somebody was dead here. And second and most important thing, I know me mom was dead here. So, you know. So, she kind of gives up at this point. And it's like, okay. And so she starts playing along. Because in reality, she knows that he's got her. And so she starts playing along. And it's like, all right. You know, what do you want? And he's like, well, you're going to get rid of that boy first. And then we're going to have our long winter nights here together. You know. And so she like offers to make him some tea. And he is like, okay. So she goes and she makes the tea, and we actually see her do it this time. She gets the cyanide bottle. She fills up her glass, you know, with tea. She fills up one of the glasses with tea, and she makes sure that they do not look alike. And then she goes in and starts serving it to him. And he, of course, is very suspicious. And he doesn't drink the one that she had for him. Instead, he's like, no, I think I'll take yours. And she's like, okay. And then he's like, well, that was too easy. You know. So he switched it back around. And she's on to the game. And then he starts drinking it after she starts drinking it from her glass. You know, and he starts talking a little bit more about what wonderful times they're going to have together. When all of a sudden, he starts coughing. And it's at that point that she leans back and she's just like looking at him. And he says, the tea tastes like almonds. And she's like, oh, it's probably these cookies, the almond cookies. You know. And then when he starts really gagging and he starts dying, they're not showing it to you, but they're zoomed in on the back of his head then at that point, and then it just zooms in on her face. And so you're just watching her watch him. And that's where the movie ends, is him dying, him obviously dying, and it's zooming in on her eyes. And I put the murder scene, nothing like this murder scene, as cold as this murder scene, since Bette Davis in The Little Foxes. Now, if you've ever seen The Little Foxes, at the end of the movie, Bette Davis's husband is like got a very, very, very serious heart condition. And he keeps medicine upstairs, and he keeps medicine to stop a heart attack by his chair in the living room. And Bette Davis comes in, they're downstairs at the living room, and she unloads a monologue on him that about how much she hated him, about how weak he was. I mean, she just rips that man to shreds to the point where he starts having the heart attack. And he reaches for his medicine and he knocks it over. And it falls on the floor and breaks. And it's at this point that he looks at Bette Davis, and who's sitting there on the couch pretty much just like that. And when he looks into her face, it's Jodie Foster's face in this movie. He looks into her face And she doesn't flinch, not even a twitch in her eye, nothing. She just stares at him without movement. Not a finger, not an arm, not a breath. And when he sees that, he's like, oh, fuck. Because he's like, quick, go get my medicine. She does not flinch, doesn't twitch. Now, when he realizes this, he starts trying to get up out the chair. He's in a wheelchair. He starts getting up out the chair. He fumbles all over the side of the couch. He even like accidentally bumps into the couch. It's the first time she moved, and then all she did was go. And then she went back to staring at the spot he was at, while he walks around her, tries to climb the stairs, and the whole time she's staring at the spot that he was at, while back there he's trying to climb the stairs, and you're seeing it, and he finally on the stairs. Bitch as cold as ice. After she's pretty sure that he's beyond speaking another word, she then jumps up and starts screaming, help, help, he's collapsed. Well, not since that have I seen a murder so cold as Jodie Foster's face when she was watching Frank die of cyanide poison. It was the exact same look that Bette Davis had in The Little Foxes. And it is like powerful. It just shoots right through you, you know, because the look in her eyes is just ice, complete ice. And I think the reason that Bette Davis had that look, because a lot of people would say, well, Bette Davis was absolute evil in The Little Foxes, and Jodie Foster is evil. She's murdered 2 people now. Anybody that gets in her way, she murders. And that's exactly what Bette Davis did in The Little Foxes. Of course, that was the only murder. And she didn't do it. She should have known that was going to make him have a heart attack. I think she did. But it was a surprise to her when it happened, is what I'm saying. It's just that when the opportunity is there, she did it. Now, and that's what the point that I was making, is Bette Davis wasn't really evil in The Little Foxes. She's just a bitch. And when the opportunity came along to solve a problem, she took it by doing nothing but sitting there. And Jodie Foster was the same way. Jodie Foster, you know, Wren isn't evil. She's not an evil character. Her and her dad had a plan for her survival and her safety. And these people are threats. They came to destroy her plan. They came to hurt her. Frank was going to hurt her. Cora was going to hurt her by destroying their plans. And I'm a survivor. And so she's not the kind of evil that goes out there. She's not homicidal. She doesn't go out there looking for someone to kill. She does not want to kill Cora. She did not want to kill her mother. She did not want to kill Frank. And if they had never come around and had left her the fuck alone, they wouldn't be dead. Okay? So it's not psychopathy. It's not, you know, psychopathic type of homicidal. It was, this is what I had to do to survive. It's what they say on the cover, you know. Ask her no questions, she'll tell you no lies. Ask her too many, and somebody dies. That's the whole point. You know, if Frank hadn't have been a fucking pedo coming around trying to get a piece, he wouldn't be dead. And if Cora hadn't have been a bitch in there snooping through her shit, she wouldn't be dead. And if her evil fucking mother had not come back around trying to get her daddy's money and get power over her, she wouldn't be dead, because Ren is not a homicidal maniac. She's not a psychopath out there looking for someone to kill, and you can guarantee that if nobody ever messes with her again, she won't kill nobody else. But if you come fucking with my shit and trying to tear down my walls, alright, all bets are off. You got one life to live, and I'm going to survive it. And that's just the way it is. So, that was my take on The Little Girl Who Lives Down the Lane. It is an absolute masterpiece, 10 out of 10. Scott Jacobi is glorious. Martin Sheen is phenomenal in the way he played this character. Jodie Foster, of course, what can you say? You know, Jodie Foster is a genius and a phenomenal actress, and the little girl and has been, you know, Taxi Driver and Little Girl. I mean, my God, Jodie Foster was just like a powerhouse from the get-go. So, yes, that is The Little Girl Who Lives Down the Lane. I love this movie. This is the Kino Lorber remaster of it. Yes. Tell me your thoughts on The Little Girl Who Lives Down the Lane. Do you believe she was evil? Do you believe she was homicidal? Or do you believe she just did what she had to do to survive? And if nobody had fucked with her, she would not have fucked with anybody else. Because that's my opinion. Well, you shouldn't kill somebody. Well, you shouldn't come and try to get a piece of my ass when I'm only 13 either, now should you? Especially without consent. It's not like I asked you for it. Now, granted, that does bring up the controversial shit, which, personally, I wish they hadn't put in there. But, you know, there is a nude scene. It was done by a body double, and it does show what we know to be a 14-year-old boy and a 13-year-old girl engaged in adult behavior, which should not be going on. However, she is living an adult life and living in an adult situation. So I guess that would mature you quicker. You know? I don't know. I do think it was unfair, though. If they were going to show her ass, they should have showed his. But that's my only gripe. I didn't really understand why you had to put the nude scene in there. And I especially didn't understand why you had to put an unbalanced nude scene. You know? But I'm always going to bitch about something, even if it's a 10 out of 10 movie. So, love you, miss you, bye. Please give me your thoughts on this. Always remember, and never forget, you are a very, very special person, even if you are not hiding a very big secret in your basement. And I will see you in the next thing. I am going to do the Omen franchise next. I'm going to do the original Omen. Damien, Omen 2, which is one of my top 10 movies of all time, of any genre. I'm going to do Omen 3, The Final Conflict, which I love. And I am going to do the 2006 remake of The Omen, which I fucking love. If you don't. And I will see you then. I'm very excited about finally doing the Omen series. Those four are the only ones. If you've been around my channel, you know I say what my franchises are. Okay? Friday the 13th, there's 7 movies. I mean, there's 6 movies. From 7 on, garbage shit. Nightmare on Elm Street, there's 4 movies. There's one called Nightmare, which is kind of a standalone. And there is... No, that's about it. Yes. Is that it? Yeah, that's it. I love the first 4 Nightmare on Elm Street. Don't give a fuck about the rest. And there you go. So, you know, The Omen has 4 movies in it that I consider existing. And I just told you what they were, and I'm going to do that next. Love you, miss you. Bye-bye. Don't drink the tea. If it tastes like almonds, Leave it alone.